Welcome back. I have the TV back on today, not because I'm expecting somebody on Zoom, but I have a couple that watch this on demand, and they can't hear you as well if we're only using my computer to pick up the sound. So now we have our ceiling mics on again. But there's really no way to hide us. If I'm using one, I got to use both. So I put a curtain. I guess I could just close the lid on that. That could work. And then I'll forget to turn it off later, but we'll do this. See how that happens. The other thing, which is especially true if you're watching this online or at home, is my audio is coming from the classroom view. And so you're probably not going to see my face unless you click over to my actual feed. And the video that's recorded for later on, it's probably going to be stuck on the classroom feed, which is the back of my head, which is not ideal if I was teaching longer. But fortunately, this class is more discussion based. But the problem is if I use my audio on my computer so that the video stays on me, then I get feedback because my voice is coming in 2 different microphones, and it just gets a little weird. So we'll make the best of it for today, and I'll see if I can experiment with another way down the road. So in any case, let's begin in prayer, and then we'll figure out what's going on. Gracious God, we give you thanks this day for the opportunity to gather around your word and among your people. We pray that this first sign of your glory in the Gospel of John, the making a wedding feast to have the joy of new wine when the old had run out. May this word be a joy to us today. Also, we pray for our sister Judy at the death of her husband Dale yesterday. And we are thankful for the peace you have given to him in a fairly short time on hospice. And we pray for their family. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus. That was your announcement if you hadn't heard the news. I know maybe you probably already found out. So, Sandy, yeah. So, and I had mentioned earlier the class, Kathy and I kind of traded the baton there. So as I was leaving the house, she had arrived. So, it's just how it goes. So, in any case,
that's God's family.
God's family, yep. All right, well, welcome back. And again, I apologize if you're just listening to the back of my head, but we're on our second week of a different approach to Bible study. It's not the permanent approach, but it's what we're doing for Epiphany. And that is to draw on the text, whether literally or just figuratively. And so we have, I think we were all here last week, so I don't have to reintroduce it to the room. If you're at home and watching this later on, basically I have a huge piece of paper with the text in the middle. And you're encouraged to kind of find your own way of going back through the text as we take time. Because in the middle of class, we'll spend a few minutes in quiet going back through this on our own. So we're looking ahead to Sunday's readings. We are in the year of Luke, but it doesn't take long for John to show up because in our 3-year cycle, John doesn't have his own year, even though he deserves one. John pops up in all 3 years. Especially at key moments in which, like the wedding at Cana, comes up often in Epiphany, no matter whose year it is. And so this is the 1 week for the request of a John class. This is the 1 week we're in John, and then we're back to Luke for the rest of Epiphany. And I think this is a familiar text for our group and for many watching. But what we'll do is we'll put this in our ear straight through together, and then we'll go back through it on our own speed and in our own ways. With or without a pen in hand, we'll work through it on our own. So first, let me read this, and then we'll go back through and I'll remind you of some questions that could shape our study. John 2. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone jars, water jars, for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." They filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. You have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So before we take a second pass through this, I don't want to say too much on I don't want to say too much. I just want us to go through this again on our own and hear the word of the Lord for us today. But I will say you can tell it's early in John's gospel, and it's been identified as the first of the signs of his glory. So John in particular has a series of 6 or maybe 7 signs that show who Jesus is. The story that immediately follows this is actually his protest in the temple, turning over the tables and such, which in John's gospel comes very early. It's not Passion Week, it's much earlier. And so, we might at least have that in mind, that to this point in the gospel, we've had John the Baptist and his prologue and Jesus's baptism and his calling of those first disciples. And now we're right away here on the 3rd day, there was a wedding. So that's kind of where this is seated. But yeah, as we go back through it, the questions are still on the whiteboard. A possible way to reflect on the text is to see how God sees through us using the X-ray of the law, and how God sees us through using the promise of the gospel. And then related to that, we didn't have time for a 3rd reading last week, but related to that could be, what are the questions we can't shake? What are the longings we can't name? What are the fears we can't face? So if any of those prompts are helpful, have at it. And let's take a few minutes on our own to come back and draw on the text. Third day, there was a wedding. What did you hear as you went through this?
There's surprises. Jesus and his disciples had been invited. Now, this was a random group of guys. Had they been together long by this time?
You mean like Jesus and his disciples being invited? Well, no, a few days. John gave us on the third day. He's been counting the days in chapter 1, so it's been about, this third day is the
So
sixth
this Gentile was invited to a Jewish wedding.
Wait, which Gentile?
Luke.
Oh, we're out of Luke right now. We're in
I
John's
know,
gospel.
but if he was one of the disciples.
Oh,
He'd
yeah,
have been there.
yeah. Luke wasn't in fact one of the disciples.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He just shows up during Paul's ministry. We don't know where he came from.
I think it's significant. And I heard your explanation, but it's on the third day. And it's tied to Jesus and his actions on the third day.
Mhm.
I mean that in the broadest sense.
Yeah, so maybe a connection between resurrection and what happens at the wedding, perhaps.
Are there any other references? Excuse me. Are there any other references to the third day besides the resurrection?
In John's gospel or
Throughout,
throughout the Bible?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there's more than a few. Yeah. I'm trying to think what would be the most significant. Was Jonah in the belly
Yeah,
of the whale
Jonah,
3 days?
Jonah is one.
3 days,
Pretty good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so. Yeah. One of the things, since we're on the numbering subject, is he says on the third day, but he's already been counting days. So in chapter 1, verse 19 is when you get into the narrative after the prologue, the poem, and so forth. So chapter 1, verse 19, John the Baptist tells people, I am not the Messiah. I'm the one calling out, the forerunner. And then in verse 29, it introduces the next day. And that's when John says, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And then verse 35 says there's another next day. And that's when Jesus tells a couple of them, come and see, where I'm staying, come and see. And then verse 43 is another next day. And that's when Nathanael asks if anything good can come out of Nazareth. So we've had, in these first 4 days, we've had a transition from John's ministry to Jesus's, and John's disciples now following Jesus, and then other people like Peter and Andrew. Andrew goes and finds his brother following Jesus. So then when our chapter begins on the third day, it's actually day 6. Because so the way they counted days, it's inclusive. So it includes the day you're on right now, which is why we say Jesus was crucified on Good Friday and raised on the third day, which Sunday's only 2 days later. But it's the third day because you inclusively say Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the third day that this wedding's happening is actually day 6, as John has been laying out this timeline. And so on the surface level, like Roger asked, on the surface level, they have not known each other very long. I mean, it's a few days. On the sort of the higher level, which John's gospel likes to work on 2 levels, on the higher level, there's new creation happening. He started with, in the beginning was the Word, and now he's telling us the story of the new creation through Christ. And what happens on the 6th day of creation? Not resting yet.
Humans.
He makes humans, and he tells them to be fruitful and multiply. And so day 6 is the perfect day for a wedding, for the one flesh union. And so for Jesus to be there on a wedding, now we're here on this key day of the creation of humans and the gift of life and procreation and all that's involved.
A wedding is a joining together.
Yeah.
And if we have man and we have Jesus, we have a joining together. And to me, that's the resurrection also, that union.
Yeah.
Unity here of man and God.
Yeah.
Complete. So, and that is the John level. That's the next
Yeah.
level that I see.
Yeah.
Because we know from other writings that Jesus is called the bride of Christ. And
We are the
so
bride
it-
of Christ. Yeah, he's the bridegroom.
That's was my next question.
Yeah.
My burning question was, who is the bridegroom?
Right, Jesus. Yeah, but yeah. Who's at the wedding? It's somebody else's wedding, but who's the real bridegroom? Yeah. Let me before I do put more teaching onto that subject. Let's stay with sort of our initial kind of as you went through this on your own, whether it's law, gospel, questions, longings, fears, or just general comments. Let's gather up some more of our initial insights, and then we'll layer on some more teaching as we go.
The question of the law was that there were 6 jars for purification cleansing.
Yeah. This is a faithful Jewish wedding. They had their water washing jars ready.
But they didn't have water in them yet.
Yeah. They were
They're
empty.
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 Because they've been used, I'm presuming, for
That
the
could be.
purification.
Maybe everybody's washed and then they dumped out the dirty water, but now they're empty.
One thing,
But the miracle couldn't happen if they'd already been filled, because maybe they'd been pre-filled with wine. It wouldn't show a miracle. So it says the servants knew they had put water in
Mhm.
and took out wine. The testimony had to be there.
There you go. Yeah, they knew the source.
Verse 3, it says the wine gave out. I see Old Testament there. If the wine was, if you will, the bad wine, the lesser wine gave out.
I find it interesting that his mother expected him to take care of this. I mean, she comes up and says they have no wine.
You ever gone into the parish hall? Moms tell kids what to do.
Yeah, that's
That's
my
the thing.
favorite thing in this
Yeah.
passage. They have no wine. Every man that's ever been married or has been by his mom
Yeah.
knows what that means.
Yeah.
We have, the trash has to go out.
And then she goes on to say, she's giving orders still,
Yeah,
like saying, you do whatever he tells you. I mean,
that's right.
Help a woman.
she's not behind the scenes here.
Yeah, but on that note, one of my favorite lectionary podcasts is from a bishop, Catholic bishop, Robert Barron. He's in Los Angeles. And, you'd expect a Catholic to talk about the Blessed Mother. And he pointed out, this is the last thing she says in the Gospels. Her last recorded words are, do whatever he tells you.
That is interesting.
I mean, she's there at the cross and
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
presumably among them throughout.
But she
The
doesn't say
the last thing Mary has to say to the church is, do whatever he tells you.
anything. That is really.
My thought on reading this, what I wrote down was, Mary had been pondering these things in her heart all these years. Was this a test of some sort? I mean,
For who?
for Mary,
Mm.
a confirmation
Mm.
of who this guy really is. Is it really God's son?
My 30-year-old son, really?
Yeah.
My unmarried,
Uh-huh.
living at home.
Mhm. Well, and all of the ramifications that would have gone through their life for those 30 years. In a strange way, they would have had to have lived the way things came about and society being what it was. That was the thought that crossed my mind when I read that just now.
Drew some arrows on the second line there and wrote in some words. Mother is the source of Jesus. she's also single here. She is a single entity. And then at the end of the line, Jesus, and the arrow is to his disciples, and they are community. So we move from source through Jesus to community in this act.
And a Catholic could say that Mary has now given birth to the church, because in giving birth to Jesus and pointing everyone to her son, now there can be disciples, and the disciples eventually learn what's going on. But right now, you're right. Right now, they don't know what's going on, or they don't think to ask him about doing something with the wine.
And as a mother, and my name is Mary, I think of it as a release.
Yeah,
Going, here, Jesus, here's your world. I mean,
Yeah.
There's your kindergarten, or however
Yeah,
many
yeah.
times a mother says that, you know.
Well, she also questioned him the time that they went to the temple and said, why did you not let us know where you're at?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
that's something she said before the last time she said this.
yeah,
One thing,
And even though Jesus was sniveling about her, giving him instructions, he honored her.
Yeah.
And did what she said.
Well, it's interesting they spell out that Mary was invited, and then after that, Jesus and the disciples had also been
Yeah.
invited. And then it gets down into the end of verse 3, it says, woman, he doesn't say mom,
Yeah.
mother, he says, woman, what concern is that to you and to me? And, you know, there's none of our business. Why get involved? And she says after that, do what he says.
yeah. Sandy?
Well, I was just gonna say, the thing he was just talking about, which I think has always been interesting, is that she ignores, I mean, he says, well, this is basically not our concern. I'm not ready, my hour's not yet come, but she basically ignores what he says and says, do whatever he tells you. So, you know, she made the decision in a way.
I use the study Bible, and it says that the word term woman is a respectful address in that culture. It can be like saying, but ma'am. So, or even higher than that. Or my dear.
And she's also becoming his disciple now and not his mother. She is his mother, but she's released him. And she's now one of the men and women of his church, his disciples. It's also, I think it fits with the timing where this is on the 6th day. This is the day of the creation of male and female and the first wedding, and now here's a wedding. And so to name her as a woman, maybe even points back to the creation itself again.
Well, and 6th day, 6 is the number of man, because he was created, but it's also represents sometimes the age of man.
Uh-huh.
And man built the temple, and man put in the sacrifices, and man, priests and man did those things. And now we have a bridegroom, if you will,
Mhm.
or doing.
Well, and the number, do you know, there's another association with the number 6. Should be evil.
666.
Or incompletion. So 666 for sure. But even the idea that 6 is less than the
It's
perfect 7.
Mhm.
And if you're a musician, you know the devil's chord or the devil's interval. Is it a diminished sixth? It's something. You take a sixth above the root note. And that used to be called the devil's interval. You weren't supposed to include that in anything. It was kind of the eeriest sound, the dissonant sound.
And so to me, those 6 stone jars represent, well, we're through with this and the Jewish rite of purification. I mean, to me, that's empty.
part of the promise is that the servants knew where the wine came from, but not the steward.
Yeah.
So the least, not the greatest,
Yes.
knew of the.
Oh, good, yeah.
Yeah.
Upside down.
Isn't it so interesting? The miracle is not described as, it's not the subject of the sentence. It's not like, and then the water turned to wine. It is just when the steward tasted the water that had become wine, it's a side remark, which is so funny. But the point is that the steward doesn't know what's going on, but the servants do. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Oh, I have a question. That phrase, "my time is not come yet," is not yet come. Do you think he said that because he really didn't believe that he had the capability to affect the water, or
Oh.
I'm a little confused by that. What do you think?
I don't think there's anything, I don't see anything in the text that suggests he wasn't sure about that.
No.
It seems like he's in control.
It echoes to me what he used to say when people would say to him, "Are you the king of the Jews? Are you this?" And he would turn back and say, "Who do you say that I am?" I mean, it's like, to me, that was the same thing as saying, "It's not my time to tell you." And he never did really say it. I mean, he said, "You have said it." When Herod declared, "You are the Messiah," but he did, those were not things he declared. And I wondered about that when I read that too. Because at the end it says, "This sign revealed him." So it said it. And it's like, hold it, it's not time for me to say that yet. I mean, just my,
And yet his glory was revealed.
Yeah.
To Mary as well.
Well, and the word is not "my time is not yet come," it's "my hour."
Yeah.
And you might notice, you went through John's gospel, the hour is all over.
Critical.
And we'll just say it, the hour is his crucifixion. That's the hour. It's not till John 12:23 that he says, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified."
maybe Mary's the one confused here. Because it's the third day and maybe she thinks this is the way he will redeem the world. By doing something miraculous.
And maybe she's hoping there's another way if you decide the sword that will pierce her heart. Mom's looking for.
If I was his mother, that's what I'd be looking for.
Does the Messiah have options? I think for me, and I've said this, I looked, the last time I preached on this was 5 years ago. So I don't think anyone will remember what I borrowed from my old sermon. The law that I hear in this right away is, when the wine has run out.
Yep.
It just, and you can take that into any area of your life. What do you do when the wine has run out? The joy is gone, or you're left empty. And it could have been good wine before or bad wine. It just, whatever it is, it's given out. This is the first day of the wedding. And weddings were multi-day affairs at that point.
Well, a good Catholic wedding used to be 3 days,
That sounds nice.
3-day drunk it was.
I don't know if it fits here exactly, but there's a little cultural thing here. When we went to Kenya she was the maid of honor and I was the groom's best man in the Kenyan wedding, which normally lasts 7 days, but they shortened it to 3 because of the old people who were there as guests. They have a committee that works on the wedding for a year.
No.
And the couple chairs is de facto on the committees, but one group works on the finances, another one works on the food, and another one works on the entertainment, another one works on the venue and arranges for the tents that have to be there. And this they meet every month, and then they distribute minutes to all the committees, and all the committees know what all the other committees are doing.
And they're also raising funds. Bride and groom don't have to pay, all of this is taken care of
Yeah, they have a
Over the year.
fundraising thing too.
by friends.
I have a sister who's very wealthy And we went to her daughter's wedding a couple years ago, and it was a 3-day affair. And all of our rooms were all paid for, and there were events through the days, and it sounded so much like what you were describing. And it was because the guests, we came from so far. I mean, it was like, whoa, who would travel this, 1,200 miles to spend an afternoon?
My point here was
I
that
hadn't thought
the
that.
steward is sort of the committee head of all
Oh,
the
that
committees.
makes sense.
They didn't go to the bridegroom, they went to the steward.
Oh,
And the steward talked to what the bridegroom had bought. Because the bridegroom had to pay, he had to make sure that there had been enough there. But somebody else had arranged to get it there. So the steward tasted it, and he talked to the bridegroom and complimented the bridegroom on the wine that he had arranged to get there, but it wasn't his responsibility.
Yeah, he doesn't say, I didn't order this.
Yeah,
It was- yeah.
when you get a compliment like that, you're gonna, well, of course.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by this idea that the wedding was not the couple's display of their dreams, but it's the gift of the community to the couple.
Mhm.
It goes that direction.
Yeah.
And then I think, because we're gonna draw more connections between this third day and Jesus's 6th day and 3rd day with his cross and resurrection, I think, what did the community plan for Jesus?
Well, and at the wedding I was at, the bride and groom left. The rest of us continued the party. I mean, for more than a day. And I hadn't even thought of it till you. I mean, whoa.
So, since I don't want to forget it, and time flies when you're having fun. So we have the 3rd day, which is also the 6th day. Then you flash forward to when the hour does come for Jesus, and he's crucified on the 6th day. Of course, his body's removed before the Sabbath. So he's crucified on the 6th day, and he's raised on the 3rd day, which is also the 8th day, or the first day of a new week. So there's a new creation kind of thing here. But John's gospel has a unique detail at the cross that the other 3 don't include, and that is that Jesus says, I thirst. They offer him the sour drink, the sour vinegar. I think he's offered a drink in the other one, but he doesn't say, I thirst. So when it comes to Jesus's 6th day, his hour, of course, is a cross, and the wine, the wine that he provided for the wedding, he himself is thirsty on the cross. And John also gives us that detail of the spear in the side and what flows out of the side of Jesus, water and blood. He's already connected, blood and wine is connected. I mean, we have sacrament there, but water and wine. So you see that first sign of his glory at Cana, the turning of water to wine. Now from his side flows water and wine, which is now takes on that sacramental dimension of baptism and supper.
And Jesus has already said during his time of ministry, if anyone has thirst, which he says in the next chapter, let him come unto me.
Saying I'm thirsty or I thirst doesn't necessarily mean a liquid.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I thirst for this or I thirst for that. It doesn't have to be a liquid.
But it's the last thing he says, and then he gives up
Yeah, he
the
says it's
spirit,
finished.
if you will. And it's like, to me, that's the transition, kind of like the Immaculate Conception. That is the Immaculate Birth.
Well, again, on the 6th day of the wedding, well, the 6th day, which is the wedding, he gave male and female wine. And on the 6th day of his Passion Week, male and female, or human society, gave him thirst. Yeah.
So many times Jesus working with his disciples as they traveled around, he would say, this generation looks for signs so that they can believe. But he wants them to believe without the sign.
Yeah.
There's a lot of verses that relate to that kind of thing.
Yeah, the very next moment when he's clearing the temple, chapter 2, verse 18, he's cleared the temple, and then the Jews say, what sign can you show us for doing this? And then later in that chapter, many believed in his name because they saw the signs he was doing. And then, of course, Nicodemus at night. Nobody could do these signs apart from the presence of God. Jesus accuses them in John 4:48. Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. It just goes on and on and on through the first half of John's gospel before you get to the passion.
6:2.
Yeah, 6 as well. Yeah, 6:2. You're looking for me not because you saw signs, because you ate your fill of the loaves. 6:26. Yeah, lots of signs. This is another, I think, good time for a Lutheran insight, which is we usually think a sign is not real. It just points to something real. So a sign that says Eugene 25 miles, like you're not in Eugene. The sign is pointing the way to the real thing. And a lot of Christians, especially American evangelical, the dominant sort of Christianity of our culture, would say that baptism and the Lord's Supper are signs that are not real. They don't convey reality. They don't convey Christ, but they become signs, and they could be very important signs, maybe even required signs, but they point to something else. They point to a conversion that happens internally, or they point to, the end of a process of joining a church, and then you have the sign of baptism. And so, but Lutherans identify that what Jesus does is sign and reality become one and the same. That the first half of John's gospel, Jesus does signs, and people either don't believe or they want the loaves, they want the meal, they don't care about the sign. And in the end, what happens from all these signs, Jesus is handed over to be crucified. The signs don't produce faith. They don't give the real thing. But once Jesus is crucified and raised, sign and reality basically become one. So that when Jesus says, "This is my body given for you," sign and reality. Or when baptism, I baptize you in the name of the Father. It's something's happening right then and there. It's not pointing to, you're being baptized because all the other important stuff has already happened. So we don't. We want to look for signs. I mean, every one of us, God, give me a sign, right? Lord, give me a sign. And signs can be good. God can give us signs for sure. But our trust is where Jesus has given us a sign and a promise attached to that sign. It said, you might see signs of me in nature, or you might see signs of me in blessings in your life. I promise you, you will see me and receive me in this sign of water, bread, and wine. And so the sacraments don't become a limitation on where God could show up, but they become a reliable place where he has promised to show up for us.
Sometimes we don't have to ask for a sign, but after we've done something, we get a sign that confirms I'm with you.
But during it, you were
You
walking
did-
in
and you
faith.
didn't ask for it,
Mhm.
but it's sort of a confirmation. I'm sure we've all had those experiences. Affirm or confirm.
Yeah.
This is well done, good and faithful servant.
Kind of ties to the wheat and the seed we did last week. Because a wheat can't grow without that chaff. It can't. I mean, that's what protects it as it's being formed in the middle. And perhaps the sign protects the reality. And so if that would be the baptism and spirit of life within, I mean, I'm just trying to remember,
Interesting.
I mean, and baptism is a man's act, so it's kind of like chaff. I mean, I know you're all Lutherans. But it is a man's act. I mean, God doesn't reach down and baptize you. It is a visible act. And so it comes from man's hands. And just like the wheat can't grow without chaff. So there you are. I mean, but it's probably going to get burned in the fire. I mean, just a thought, just my mind does that. And I did that because I drew those wine things and they look an awful lot like a grain seed when you realize, oh, the wine is in the middle. The vessel is on the outside.
Sure.
It takes the touch of Christ before what's on the inside becomes life-giving. I mean,
Before the stone is rolled away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's just, I mean, that's really also part of the power of sacramental theology compared to a theology of signs. Give me a sign, Lord. Let me feel that you're here. Is that, my goodness, Jesus gave us his word and he said, go do these things, go forgive others' sins in my name, go baptize and make disciples of all nations. He's given us this authority that we can't handle or deserve, but he's given it to us so that when we do these things in his name, he's doing it through us. Like we become instruments of God's grace, which is astounding because that's a lot more heavy of a responsibility than sort of, well, go out and say stuff and then people will work it out amongst themselves. Like, it's like, no, I'm giving you my word. It's going to do what it says.
Well, trouble that's for science is sometimes you might not recognize the sign. So you're waiting, and you might have 2 or 3 signs,
Yeah.
supposedly, you never recognize it.
Yep.
Creates a long way.
Yeah.
So,
It would be interesting to know what the conversation was between Jesus and his disciples while they're waiting for the jars to be filled. I mean, they had time to fill.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There must have been some chit chat going on. I never talked to my mom like that or whatever.
but maybe they were all mingled among the crowd. I'm not sure they always went as a troop.
Well, I don't know. The disciples are mentioned in the second line and the disciples are mentioned in the last line.
Right.
So they must have been along the way there watching what was going on.
Maybe.
And it says they believed from what they saw.
Yeah, that is kind of the climax of this story is, he revealed his glory and his disciples believed in him. Yeah.
I just imagine the conversation being something like, now guys, just stand around and watch what's going to happen now because he's going to take this over to the steward and test it. And it's not going to be water anymore, guys. Or whatever the conversation was, but I'm sure they just didn't stand there and do nothing.
Didn't, and
If we were there, we would have been talking about, oh, look what she's wearing today. I didn't expect to see him here.
it didn't
Look at this,
involve
I think
them
about
in
They get
this.
private, huh?
Eugene Peterson, rewriting the Bible, but he wrote it to give so the average person would have a better understanding of how it's versed and the words he used. Because Peterson explains this so we can understand it better. And doesn't change the meaning of it, but he changes the understanding of it. That's what he does.
Yeah, he takes liberties, but he does open up some new understandings.
Right.
I was just looking it up. It's in the message, he says, is that any of our business, mother? So he changes it to mother, because he wants us to know it's not offensive, but he's making a little change there. Is that any of our business, mother, yours or mine? This isn't my time. Don't push me.
Oh,
Well, that's, I mean, that's just an addition to the Bible.
Mhm.
So, you always want to, if you want to, it's great for making things clear up a little bit, but I always caution people to read it next to a
Mhm.
formal translation.
What does Peterson say on the very last where it says his disciples believed?
It was the same, it's his disciples believed in him.
I like his
I'm
words
thinking
there,
the word
though.
believe and what it all means.
I like the word that it says there, though. This act in Cana was the first sign Jesus gave, the first glimpse of his glory. So I didn't give him much to believe on. I mean, it was a glimpse. And I thought it was interesting, he didn't involve them, because he does later in
Pretty
Cana.
dramatic, wouldn't it?
Pretty dramatic.
You know, it's only in the Bible where we say believe and in put together. When I believe my wife, I don't say I believe in my wife.
Yeah, when we put
Why
those-
do we put in?
I have thoughts on that. I mean, but
That's a
did
good
you have
question.
something to follow up that? Like,
Yeah, it's just
I like that question.
in.
Yeah.
is-
well, faith always believes in something. Faith is like it always has an object.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so, you know, we post-enlightenment people want to say belief is just it's head knowledge. You just believe stuff. But to believe in means now you're sticking your life on it. You know, there's kind of an old illustration. It's kind of a classic about the guy who tightrope walks across the waterfall, right? Back and forth. Who believes I can do this? The crowd cheers. He does it. Who believes I can do this while pushing a wheelbarrow? Crowd cheers. He does it. Who wants to get in the wheelbarrow? And you know, nobody wants to go. So they believe him. They don't believe in him. And yeah, so there is a significant difference there. I mean, the demons believe in God or believe God. You know, they believe that there is God. Yeah. Just a two minutes. We're gonna wrap it.
Well, it looks like the people that came to the wedding were willing to drink the inferior wine and they got drunk on it.
Mhm.
So you kind of wonder what
It was sick.
what it tasted like if it was inferior.
and the inferior didn't come.
Yeah.
They had the good one. And then they got better.
Yeah.
But they thought the inferior would follow what they were doing. It didn't.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, this would be a text where somebody could kind of denigrate Judaism in light of Christianity, but one of the things it's doing is saying Judaism was good wine. The purification was good wine. It was good law. It's God's law and God's people. There's something even gooder than good, you know, better than good.
Continuation of God's story.
Yeah.
In a minute or less, do you have to put the rite of purification involved?
Well, this was probably just a hand washing station, and they had 6 of them because there was a lot of guests. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 180 gallons is a lot.
But they have washed their feet there too, after that travel.
I don't know that they'd use the same one for the feet and hands. I'm not sure. Like, maybe there's some process. And I don't know if there'd be enough servants to do that for people, or people kind of wash up when they come in.
After the cholera epidemic in Africa, they found out it was because people didn't wash their hands after they used the toilet. And so all over Africa, there's this, and it's like a cultural right, and a lot of people might not even know, because that was decades ago. But when you sit down at the table, they come around with a basin, 2 people, and you put your hand over the basin, and they'll pour water over your hand and give you some soap. You'll wash your hand, and then pour your hand, water over your hand again into that basin, and they hand you a towel to dry. And it's kind of a cultural togetherness kind of
It's
thing.
actually the way they start their meals.
You go into a restaurant, and there's like a sparklets bottle over there, and you wash your hands and the same way. It's just part of the way things are done.
Even after walking 3 miles for all the water you get home.
Yeah. Yeah. It killed the cholera epidemic, and they do it for life.
Yeah.
But I don't think they put that water back in those jars.
Yeah.
It came out of the jars.
Yeah.
But probably just went right to the soil.
Well, it's the noon hour. Oh, now the source of cleansing is in Jesus. And it's wine, wine's not just, a better way to wash or have joy, but wine is very new creation, pointing to the future. Remember he told the disciples, I won't drink this wine with you until we taste it new in the kingdom of God. So there's definitely a new age, second age sense of it.
And the second lesson is do what she says.
Yeah, do what she says. And
Even if she doesn't say it,
Yeah,
you know what she means.
right.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you. See you all soon.
So, we'll figure that out.